Choose you this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
So ADHD is associated with a lot of shame. Okay, so this is what happens in people with ADHD. Like, you're smart, you know you're smart. You look around and there are other people that are able to do normal things. People that are stupider than you are, that are able to do normal things, and you can't do those things. Despite your IQ, you can't do those things. Despite all of your potential, you can't do those things. Despite being in gifted and talented classes when you were in the 3rd grade, you can't seem to focus your mind and pass a single exam in high school. So what happens in ADHD is people don't understand that they've got ADHD. So what happens is that they just feel like they're busted in some way, and they feel like they suck at life. They don't really understand, because the other problem that we see in ADHD is that oftentimes people have high IQs and they develop compensatory mechanisms. So what that means is that despite your ADHD, you basically use like some kind of weird IQ compensation to make it so that you can function semi-normally. But this IQ compensation, it's sort of like, I have a flat tire, but I'm so strong that I can just push the car, which like allows you to go 15 miles an hour when everyone else is going like super slow. So you're like exerting a ton of effort to ultimately get something that's kind of normal despite a very heavy handicap. And over time, these compensatory mechanisms no longer work.
What he's talking about is mental retardation, to put it bluntly. You know that word everybody seems to hate, and YouTube even censors me for. And yeah, I can't use the word retard, even though I'm legitimately a mental retard, you know, by the book. And this is what he's talking about. ADHD is a form of mental retardation. In fact, it could be one of the most high-functioning forms of it, to be honest with you. But he was talking about that shame. He's right. Remember, I was talking about going to the doctor, and the neurologist told me, it's all your fault, you're having seizures, or you're faking it, or something. All these things because I'm deficient. But like he said, I'm smart enough to think I work hard enough and I can at least make it. And that's what happened. As I made it so long, everybody thought it was a fake. But because I was told as a young child about my diagnosis and everything that happened to me, and explained to me, parts of my brain were missing and those things, I was able to always keep in the back of my mind that this doctor is not taking into effect everything that actually happens, when it comes to these sorts of things. So, education when you're real young seems to be a real big benefiting factor to treating mental illness later in life, which is funny because doesn't it seem like it's almost an agenda to try to keep you from, or at least these younger generations, from learning about anything except social justice? It's not funny.
Normal despite a very heavy handicap. And over time, these compensatory mechanisms no longer work. And so you used to be able to do what other people could do, and despite your high IQ, now you suddenly suck at life, which results in a bunch of shame. And the more shame you have, the more you need coping mechanisms.
That's making sense.
And then generally speaking, because your brain is, remember, sensitive to reward, because you've got an ADHD brain, the kinds of coping mechanisms you end up with are maladaptive ones. So it's hard for you to sit there and meditate if you've got ADHD.
All right. So he's talking about the more deficiencies that over time end up causing you to fail, cause you shame, and then you need even more, coping mechanisms to, on top of the fact that you already have a dopamine deficiency from the ADHD. And, he's talking about the parts of the brains it affects and everything. It makes a lot of sense. You really need to watch the video. But, like I was talking about with the being told what was wrong with me, being taught, about Christianity and empathy and taught to practice that at a young age, and to learn to read and write and to teach myself and to want to be curious and to have that. I'm sorry, when I look away, I'm trying to find the right word. To have that, encouraged, by my adopted parents, it really makes a big difference because I didn't have to and don't have to turn to drugs as compensation. I can use them to help with symptoms now that I've got everything, sorted out. But, I don't rely on them and I don't have to have them. And they don't make a difference, really, other than comfort. Because the medications I'm using, again, like he was talking about stimulants, caffeine. I use that because, well, it does what he says it does. And because I don't have any issues regulating my dopamine problems if I, have too much or too little or irregular or whatever, I don't have an issue with that anymore because I'm mature and I'm disciplined. But also knowing all these problems that happened with me, again, helps me compensate. Is a big compensation mechanism that I think a lot of people are missing. And by the time they realize what had happened, maybe they're so schizophrenic they just can't accept reality. Because that's kind of what it is, isn't it? All right, let's keep on going.
Compensation to make it so that you can function semi-normally. But this IQ compensation, it's sort of like, speaking, because your brain is, remember, sensitive to reward, because you've got an ADHD brain, the kinds of coping mechanisms you end up with are maladaptive ones. So it's hard for you to sit there and meditate if you've got ADHD. So instead what you're going to turn to is drugs and video games and social media. Right? Because you're so ashamed of yourself. So this is kind of the second place where drug use comes in, where...
All right, that's the difference for me, or with me. I don't have any shame. And the shame that I was building up, again, when I started getting blamed, for occasional, recreational drug use, which is, again, just a little bit of alcohol once or twice a month and some marijuana back in the day, But the doctor blamed all my seizures and all my problems on that. And even after I quit, he said, well, maybe I fried my brain from doing it earlier in life or whatever, even though I never touched it until I was 19. I had no shame. And the shame I was building up from him was easily dispersed because I was still stuck in reality. I still knew I was born this way. I had parts of my brain beaten in and other parts of my body damaged, which also psychologically damaged other parts of my brain during development, which was already deficient from birth, blah, blah, blah. And the doctor was like, oh no, it's because you drink a couple of beers and smoke some pot. But I was able to diffuse the shame enough to save my life because literally I was suicidal for a little while with it, and unfortunately, I guess, I don't know for everybody everywhere all the time, but it seems that once those thoughts really do enter your mind like that, they're hard to leave. And who knows, maybe I had those thoughts since I was real young and they just came back after that doctor put me through all that stuff, and I was losing my job and my license and all these things and racking up millions of dollars in hospital bills that they weren't even helping me solve my problem for. They're just conveniently taking me out of public view because I'd fall out. Because I was, like he said, pushing too hard to be normal. Working and, behaving and, it's hard for a retard.
HD, those two things are going to be, the substance is going to be contributing to the problem, like 100%. So first thing you've got to do is stop separating out the substance use from all of your other problems. Your problems are not going to get fixed as long as you're using substances.
Okay, I totally agree. with him that you can't separate the substances from the ADHD. Do they necessarily contribute to them? I would say not all of them, but some. Because he kind of makes it sound like even video games and anything that does anything to... And that's a little wrong, I think. Addiction are things that cause long-term negative effects. And he's over here thinking that you can fix it, and that's where I really just kind of have to stop and disagree. He says you can fix this or start fixing this by, and I have to stop. Of course, he says go sober and to fix this problem. I'm hoping he's talking about the problem of substance use, abusing drugs, being addicted to them. Absolutely, go sober. That's the way to start fixing that problem. If he's talking about trying to start fixing ADHD, you can't. That's why, if you're like me and you can have the capability to be self-aware and not separate those two, but accept those two and accept the risks, the problems, and benefits that come with, knowledgeable self and or recreational medication, then I guess you're on another level. And that's where that education comes in when you're real young. Because I have no shame. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, share, and subscribe. I think I've got a good little format going here with taking clips of, psychiatric material and other, interesting and quirky or complicated issues and trying to break them down a little bit more retarded. And I've got a channel called For Real Retard that I'll probably start posting these on. Alright, see y'all in the next video.
Answer the phone, Joshua!